Yo, what is up, y'all? Man, I wanted to come on here and talk about being called to speak and really the importance of having a spiritual practice. I was on a coaching call with my clients today, and I was just thinking, like, man, like, what's that one thing that if they don't do any of the other things that I'm telling them to do, or advising them to do, or suggesting, or inviting them to do, that would be the main thing that's going to help them achieve some greater results in the things that they're doing. And for me, it was around the importance of having a spiritual practice. And I said this quote, and I'm going to read it to you. Okay. For those that are called to greatness, to make an impact in this world, to be a light in the midst of darkness, an ambassador of peace, an agent of positive change, it is mandatory that the depth of their spiritual practice matches the weight of their spiritual calling. So listen, if I'm gonna read it again, but if you're watching this and you're tuning in, go ahead and show me some love in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from. If you're watching this replay, hashtag replay. Would love to engage with you, even if you're watching this as a replay. It's one of the things I love about social media is that I can still have a real time engagement, even if you're not with me in real time. If that makes sense. So let me read this again. You ready? For those who are called to greatness, to make an impact in this world, to be a light in the midst of darkness, an ambassador of peace, an agent of positive change. It is mandatory, listen to me, mandatory that the depth of their spiritual practice matches the weight of their spiritual calling. Man, y'all, that's a loaded statement. And so much I could say around this, but I noticed that for me, when it comes to really being a vessel, I talk about the difference between being a speaker and being a spiritual vessel all the time. It's like anybody can be a speaker, right? But not everybody is willing to become a spiritual vessel. And the reason why is because you can be a speaker and you can be mechanical. You can go to Toastmasters, you can hire a speaking coach. They can teach you how to use your hands, your vocal inflection, your body language. Like they can talk to you about all these things. But the real impact happens when you're a spiritual vessel, when you allow divine to flow through you, when it's not just that you can say things well and that you have good theatrics, but it's that you say the right things at the right time in the right way with the right essence. It is the fact that people know that you were sent there by God to be there in that exact moment, in that time for them. And that can happen in levels. The more open you are, the deeper your practice is, the more impact that you'll make. And that's been my experience. And I noticed that for me, I have a tendency sometimes to uh maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Like to go through the motions, but not actually go to the depth, right? So like I'll there was a whole this was like a couple weeks ago, maybe like 2 months ago. Um, I was knowing that I'm running these live events and was in this spiritual practice. I was like going out in nature, I was doing meditations, I was praying, I was walking my dog and like just like working through things and listening, doing all these things. And it was like I didn't feel like the results in my life were what I wanted them to be. And I didn't feel like the conflict that I was experiencing was like I had any more strength to get through it. Like I just felt like, man, I was just stuck in this rut for a long time. And what happened is that when I really got honest with myself and I really started to look like, man, hey, what is the quality of this time that I'm spending with God? Like, am I actually having insights? Am I actually feeling like a peace that surpasses all understanding? Am I actually having divine downloads and getting guidance to build and navigate my life? And the truth is that I wasn't. And the reason wasn't because God wasn't seeking to communicate this information to me. The reason is that I wasn't going there. I wasn't talking about the real emotional conflict I was having, relational conflict I was having, the the dreams that are in my heart, the passions that I have, the frustrations that I'm carrying, the burdens that I wasn't really having like that honest conversation. And a lot of times I don't, you know, get into that honest conversation with God because I just feel like he knows everything. And it's just like, why am I sitting there, voicing how I feel, to God? And a big part of that challenge for me stems back to my childhood because in a lot of ways, the way that I was feeling didn't matter. Right, like I was too emotional. Oftentimes, I was teased, and even by my own family, they call me a crybaby, and they like make fun of me and stuff like that. And it taught me that, like, man, my emotions like don't really matter. Like how many of you have ever heard a parent say, "Man, you better stop crying, or I give you something to cry about." And what that did was it taught me that I had to have a reason to cry. Like I had to have this explanation to like, yo, I'm crying because it's a legit hardship, right? I couldn't just cry because I had emotions coming up for me. And in a lot of ways, I tend to bring that into my relationship with God. And so I won't talk to him about how I'm actually feeling because I feel like it doesn't really matter. Like I need a legit reason. Like I feel like I should have more courage, or I feel like I should have more strength, or I feel like I should know better than to worry because I'm not supposed to worry. And I'm not actually having that real honest conversation with God. And so that impacted my mental health. It caused a lot of the depression that I faced, a lot of the anxiety I faced, and it impacts my ability to be effective as a speaker because I'm not actually cultivating the spiritual insight and the strength and the fortitude that's needed to truly change lives from stage. And so, man, I just want to come on here and just really open that conversation and highlight that maybe if you're a person that struggles to communicate your emotions because maybe like your parents, it wasn't like a thing, like children are supposed to be seen and not heard, or maybe like me, that was the type of thing you were raised in where it's like, hey, you better stop crying or I give you something to cry about. Right. And or maybe you had a father who was emotionally absent, and so you feel like your heavenly father is the same way. Like whatever that is for you, it's a good thing to start to look at like, man, how am I actually going there emotionally in my spiritual practice? Am I talking about real things? Am I allowing the God and to speak to me about real things? Am I processing real emotions? Like am I actually going there at the depth that matches the weight of what I feel called to? And most people can identify the weight of their calling. When I talk about, hey, what do you feel called to? Man, I know I'm called to impact lives. I know I'm called to change families. I know I'm called to speak to people in business. I know I'm called to speak to women, and I know I'm called to speak to men about mental health. I know I'm called to like they have a lot to say around that. But when it's just like, hey, so you feel all that emotion from what you're called to, do you feel that weightiness, that depth in your spiritual practice? And a lot of times it's like, no, like, hey, I go work out, or I go walk in nature, or I go walk the dog, or I meditate, and I just kind of like I have like spiritual bliss, like I feel better, but I don't actually have insights. I don't actually have guidance. I don't actually feel like deep connection in a way that transforms how I go about my day. And man, it's super, super important. So I encourage you that, like, man, like be honest with God, like open up emotionally. Your heavenly father is not like your earthly father who was potentially emotionally absent, right? Um, our God cares about the smallest details of our life. And I have to remind myself of that. And a lot of times I think it's for God, but it's really for me. It's me hearing myself. It's me getting it off my chest. It's me being able to work through my fears, my insecurities, my worries, so that I can be open to the larger conversation about what God is really doing in the earth. So, wanted to come on here and share that with you, man. It was so good to really just be able to talk to my clients and have that conversation with them. Because a lot of times we get so caught up in doing all these other things, thinking that that's how we book, like do business. And it's like, yeah, like have your outreach going, have your PR agent working for you, like have your team members doing all the nitty gritty work on your behalf, like have all that, but make sure you are in a depth of spiritual practice that's going to fuel and shape and mold and direct all of it. Okay. So if any of this resonated, let me know. Like, hey, more of this, or man, thank you for covering this, or man, that's exactly what I've experienced. Like, let me know if any of this resonated in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. And again, if you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, let me know. Love to connect with you. Love to know if this type of content is helpful for you. Okay. All right, y'all. Gotta go. Peace.